finally gets to the hospital after riding 30 miles on his bicycle. Let's see what happens now as we continue on this journey.
So I rode up to the hospital and I rode up to the emergency room door, which was shut. And then a male nurse opened up the door and asked if I needed some help. And I told him about my foot. And so he held open the door for me. And after I parked my bike, I went over and parked it in a bicycle rack nearby. He ushered me inside the door. So I walk in the door and there's a hallway. Towards the end of the hallway, it opened up a little bit and there were some beds, emergency room beds on the right-hand side. But immediately, right when I walked in, two male doctors, one of which was the head of emergency, came to examine me in the hallway. And the first thing that they asked me to do was to walk down the hall and let them see what was wrong with me. So I walked down the hall and I wrote it here specifically, there was a slight exaggerated limp favoring my right side. So I wanted to show them that it was my right foot that was hurt. And I over exaggerated the limp that I needed to be doing at this point. Then they asked me to stand on my toes. I did okay on my left foot, but I struggled with my right. So they had me sit down on the edge of one of the emergency room beds to examine me further. I looked down and there was blood showing through the top of my sock on the right foot where I had skinned the top of my foot. They saw a scar on my left foot and started examining it. And here's where I write in parentheses, I have a scar on my right foot from a break and my only surgery in life, which happened around 1979. I told them it was an old injury and surgery and that my right foot, not my left foot, was the problem. So then once I straightened them out on that, I asked them if there was a restroom close by that I had to go pee.
Okay, let's just stop. Let's stop there.
Okay.
Let's deal with the doctors and that kind of thing. What do you make of, there's a point before the confusion that I was going to ask you about. Well,
About
okay.
the exaggerated limp?
Not yet. It's before
Okay.
that.
Okay.
I think it's, you're talking about the contrast between what would be happening in the waking day life and what is happening in a dream, and how part of noting that is realizing how they're compatible, how they fit together, how the subconscious mind and conscious mind are meant to work together. In other words, the subconscious mind and the conscious mind don't see things the same way. Their duties and purposes are totally different. So it's very similar to male and female, which is why the gender is important in terms of dreams, because it's being able to see the boundaries or the extremes so that then you can work together, do the dance is what I like to call it, in words in the conscious subconscious minds working together. So you've addressed it, but I'd like you to go a little deeper with the fact that I thought it was curious, because if it was in the waking world, you probably would not have gotten on your bike if your foot was injured, number one. You certainly wouldn't have ridden for, how long was it? 30 miles?
Yeah, about 30 miles.
Yeah, just 30 miles. And you got a hurt foot,
yeah,
right?
And I have noted in here past many other hospitals that are much closer to home. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. So it's like, what kind of healing you want. And so part of that's almost like a goal setting, where you realize what your goal is, and that's where you're going, right? So the thing that I found was curious was that if you had actually gone to the hospital, they would have immediately put you in a wheelchair, because that's what they do. Especially if your body's injured in the way it is, they would have you get off of that foot, right? And that didn't happen. So you have a male nurse, which is an unknown conscious aspect for you, who is aiding you at that point with initiating the healing process that then goes to the doctors. And the doctors would be, I would suspect, superconscious aspects that know about the healing. And there's an interesting interaction between you with them, because you want to make sure that they know what the problem is, and they don't really get it. So I was curious as to what you were thinking about that now, looking at it as a dream with symbols, translating the symbols and going into it. And if you had any thoughts about that before we go further, about what all that confusion seems to be.
Well, the first thing I think about is that, especially for the type of injury I had, I would never get two doctors approaching me in the emergency room, you know. So you've got duality there. So the subconscious is introducing that for a reason. I haven't quite grasped yet, but and certainly I would not get one of them that was the head of emergency, you know, and that was, I mean, that was very clear in the dream that one of them was the top doctor there for a foot injury, you know.
You know what this is cool, because what listening to you speak, and so much of going deep in dreams is actually having the individual who had the dream relay it, because as you're relaying it, you're reliving it.
Mhm.
And so, you know, with me being in the position of giving you feedback, or, you know, just conversing with you about it, then that informs me in ways that are not just like reading the dream. And what I just saw was linked to something that I'm aware of, which I think is our subconscious connection here, with the fact that you went to the emergency room, even though you had been cycling for 30 miles to get here, right? And so it's like, I did a presentation at a dowsing conference, actually.
Okay, now, what does Kundalini, dreams, and the Om Challenge have in common? Check it out.
At a dowsing conference, actually, which was, I think it was titled Dreams. No, Kundalini. It was on Kundalini, the emergence of the new oracle, I believe is what it was called. And the premise of the talk was that Kundalini is emerging. And so where this put my mind, and where your dream and the oming that we're doing and everything that we're doing right now, and the situation, because right now we're in March in 2022, and there's that world setting that anybody either knows it or they can research it. They probably will always know it because it's so inflammable, right? All of that's been happening since 2020, and most probably will happen the whole decade, is about the emergence of Kundalini in humanity. Up until now, it was pretty much an individual experience that people just went through, and we saw it as cultural. We saw it as age group, like in America, we saw it as teenagers and that kind of thing, which is the onset of puberty physically for the human being. At this juncture, though, in our development as a species, what part of the newness that's coming in is realizing that there's a mental and an emotional interaction going on that is driven by a different kind of response to puberty, which is creativity. And it also links to what you said about the duality element, the two, like they're two doctors, also the left and right foot and the confusions with those, that kind of thing. There's a lot of that in the dream. And I think that those elements in the dream are linked to Kundalini. They're linked to the emergence of your creativity, because creativity really is how we heal. We create wholeness. And so rather than think about healing as reactions to pain, because in the dream, you don't let any pain at all stop you. You've injured it, and yet you just keep going through everything. You cycle, you walk. It's highly instructive to me. If it was my dream, it would be a very complimentary dream that would be telling me about my effort that I put in, my disciplines, you know, what I've done in my life that has gotten me to this point where I can be injured, where there's a change in my spiritual foundation that I'm recording first fearfully as a pain, as an injury, that kind of thing. However, there's something more afoot here that's part of a much bigger picture that I'm aware of.
Yeah, well, I have examples in conscious physical life of doing things like this where I've been injured and still went on to achieve a goal. But it's very calculated. It's not just cavalier. It's, you know, I, I've been in positions where I knew I couldn't injure myself further as long as I paid attention to what I was doing. It wasn't like, okay, there's warning signs here, you need to stop. I would stop, you know, but where I've gotten injured and I've still pushed on to complete the goal. And it's similar, I guess, to what I didn't make that connection until you were starting to talk about it. So
That might be an affirmation for you. What you just said may be the affirmation that you will achieve the healing that you want.
yeah,
That, you know, it's like it's the essence of faith that moves into intuition, you know, from belief to knowing. So that faith bridge is everything. And what you've just told me is that you have complete faith because you have been over that bridge a lot of times, and you know the bridge. You know how to handle yourself when you're injured. You know how far to push it, when to do what. And that's really highly significant.
and that might be a connection to the next dream, which has a very familiar bridge in it.
Oh my gosh,
So,
yes. Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes.
Um,
Now, stay tuned for part 3, where Billy discusses why he gets so frustrated in this dream and why doctors are acting like children.